Okay, so today we're doing Mishlei 11.3, and I'm a little nervous about this one because today we are doing two Mishleic personality types, one of which we've had before and the other one we've never had before. Okay, and so I have a plan A and a plan B, and the plan B is not B because it's bad. It's B because if we fail at A, then this is like what we're falling back on in terms of like something that we know is going to be good. So plan A is to try to figure out the pasuk on our own, as we usually do. Okay, and then we can use Mefarshim if need be. Plan B is that okay? You know what? Okay, maybe there's a plan B and a plan C. Okay, plan B is the Malbim. Curiously enough, even though I don't usually use the Malbim, Malbim apparently has good definitions of these two personality types, and so if need be, we can use his definitions without reading his translation, without reading his commentary, and then plug his translations into the pasuk. Okay, and then plan C is Rabbeinu Yonah has the definitions that I've been working with for many years, but they're very unclear in terms of the way he states them, not in terms of the ideas, but like the language is very difficult, and he has like an essay on the two personality types, which if need be, we can resort to that. Okay, so I'm hoping we can do this like a normal one, but just know that we have like options to fall back on if need be. With that said, let's go to the pasuk, and you'll see almost every term in the pasuk you need a dictionary for. Okay, so I will not begrudge anyone if they don't want to try translating. Okay, Tumas Yesharim Tanchem, the Selef Bogdim, and then this is a Creek sieve, so you read it one way and it's written another way. So it's written Vishadim, but it is read Yishadim. Okay, with the vav as a yud. Okay, does anyone want to try translating it? If not, no worries. We're just going to go right to the dictionary. Or what words do you know? Let's put it that way.
Yashar?
Yeah, Yashar, right? So how would you translate Yashar?
Straight.
Yeah. So Yasharim is straight or upright. Okay.
And Nachem is like mercy.
Okay. So
or Nechem, I don't know. Is it the same
yeah.
word?
So the shorish of Tanchem is actually nun ches he, which is a weird one. Okay. The only context I know it in is in Mizmor LaDavid that Perchav Gimel Yanchein b'maglei Sadiq, but that's not a very familiar thing. Okay, so let's look at the words here. Okay, so Tumas Yisharim. So Tuma here is not Tuma like Tuma and Tahara. Tuma is from the word Tam. Okay, now our Torah translates it as integrity. Okay, so let's just we have to map out all these words because the words are so difficult here. Okay, so I'm gonna go like this. Tam. So let's do this. Tumas, Tam, Tamimus. Okay, could mean integrity. Okay, now I believe we've had Tom before. So how have we had Tom? Maybe even recently. I feel like. Do we have it? Yeah, Ishtam, right? Yeah. Do we have that like in the last pasuk? Hold on, I gotta look see what the last pasuk was. No, not the last one. I feel like we had this very recently. Was it at the end of 10? I thought we had it recently. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it. All right, fine. So what is a Tom?
Complete or simple?
Okay, so I'd say complete is probably better than simple in terms of biblical Hebrew. And so we're gonna go integrity, and then I had it in the student I was tutoring. That's okay. That's why wholesomeness. Okay, and the Rabbeinu Yonah's definition of wholesomeness, which I said that we would. Okay, you know what? Let's leave it like that. Okay, I won't. I'll try to like resist plugging stuff in unless we need to. Okay, so Tumas Yesharim. So this Tom quality of Yesharim. Okay, and Yesharim are people. Okay, those who are straight or upright. Okay, Tanchem will lead them or guide them. Okay, so hold on, let me just get this working translation. Okay, the Tom quality of Yesharim will of Yesharim. Okay, the upright will lead or guide them. Okay. The selef. Okay, selef is one that you might know, but it's also a rare word. Okay, so selef is the crookedness. Okay, but the crookedness of bogdim. Anyone know what bogdim are?
Traitor.
Yeah, traitors. Okay, I don't know who said that, but traitors. Okay, the bogdim. Sorry, the crookedness of bogdim. So yeah, bogeid. We actually, I know where you know this from. Is ashamnu bogadnu. We have acted treacherously, or we have like betrayed. Okay, yishadin from shadad. See, it's difficult pasuk, right? Will deal violently with, despoil, devastate, or ruin them. So let's just say will devastate them, okay? Or destroy them. Yeah, devastate them is fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at oh actually you went there are multiple meanings here. Okay, we'll devastate them or rob them. That's okay. So you see Mitsustian says Selef is inyan akum kumovi self divrei, so it means to make crooked. Yeshadim is miloshin shadida ugzela, to devastate or rob them. Literally, I guess despoil, like to take their like bounty. Okay, let's look at the English here. The innocence of the just will guide them. Okay, so they say Tom is innocence. I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, well, I'll add it anyway just in case. Okay, innocence of the just. Now they say just. That I really don't like. Not that it's wrong, but I feel like justice is either like you the word mishpat or tzedek. Okay, but the corruption of the faithless will despoil them. Faithless here does not mean faithless like lacking emuna in terms of God. Faithless means like you can't have faith in them because they're traitors. Okay, so that's our school. Living Knox says the innocence of the upright guides them, but the perversity of the treacherous robs them. Okay, so they're taking crookedness or self as like warped or perverted. Alter says the upright's innocence guides them, but the falseness of traitors destroys them. Falseness I also don't like because it has to be like perversion or twisting or corruption or crookedness, something with a taking that which is like straight and making it crooked. Okay, well we hobbled through that all right. Okay, so let's just go over the translation again. Tumas Yesharim Tanchem. So the tam quality, or the tamimus quality, the tuma of the Yesharim of the upright will lead them or guide them, but the crookedness of bogdim will despoil or rob them. Okay, that wasn't so bad in terms of reading. It was just bad because no one knew any words, and so like there was nothing to debate. We just have to kind of rely on our dictionaries here. Okay, so now let's get to the questions.
It's just to start off like the definition questions.
Yes, let's do the definition question. What is Tom?
What is Selef?
Yep. What is Selef? Okay. Oh, sorry. Selef corruption.
And Yashar and a bogeid.
Yeah. What is a Yashar upright person? I don't know why I capitalized it. Is that like an actual word that I don't know about? Hold on. Yashar is singular and Yasharim is plural. Okay. And bogeid. What is a bogeid? Nope, not bogged. Bogeid. Let's do that. Traitor. Yeah.
And who are they guiding?
So I think the only way to read it is that the tuma, the tomness of the Yesharim will guide the Yesharim.
So not
because
other
otherwise
people?
I think you have to specify. Yeah, I think it would have to say I think it would have to say who it is. I'll ask the question anyway, but who is being guided? Okay, I'm going to say plain pshat is the Yesharim themselves.
I'm so curious what your thought process is. Like, where are you getting that from?
Because it said they're the only other person in the pasuk, right? The tomness of the Yesharim will guide them. Who's the them? The Yesharim. And same thing with the Bogdim. The self of the crookedness of the Bogdim will rob them or will devastate them, meaning the Bogdim
You mean like other Bogem or themselves as
themselves.
a person?
Themselves, yeah.
Can we ask then, like the how? Like how does the Tom guide
Yeah.
the Yashar?
Okay, sure. So, how is the Yashar guided? Why does it keep capitalizing it? Why is how is the Yashar guided by his his Tim? Yeah, I apologize by the way for people who are not fluent in the Hebrew conjugations, but hopefully if I just list them all, then you'll pick them up eventually. Tamimus is like the noun form of Tom, and Tom is the person form. Okay, and Tum'a is another thing for Tamimus. Okay, whatever. Yeah. So
I have a
how will
question.
it guide him? Yeah.
Sorry. I have a question, but like it might be a repeat because honestly I spaced out for a second.
That's
But
fine.
okay. So we said that the Tom quality, like for question 5, that the Yisharim are being guided. So in the second part, definitely we're saying that the traitors are being devastated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll add that as a question though, because we didn't have that. Who is being devastated, robbed? Okay, and then plain shot is the Bogdim themselves. Yeah. And
Another
I'm just-
question.
yeah, sure.
In what way are the Yisharim and the Bogdim opposites?
Okay. So in what way? How are the Yasharim and Bogdim opposites?
How are they not opposites?
Well, I guess we'll have to wait for you to enlighten us.
Is it that the Yisharim and the Bogdim are opposites, or that the Tumat and the Selef are opposites, and that's what drives the
That's
pasuk?
it's a very good question, right? Because if I had to choose if Selef means crooked, then I would say that Selef is the opposite of Yashar, but structurally in the pasuk, Selef seems to be the opposite of Tom, because it's the blank of the blank. It's the Tomness of the Yasharim and the Selef of the Bogdim. So I'll add Mayan's question. Are they? Are the opposites something else? And just to respond to Ariel's how are they not? I mean, if I ask you what's the opposite of a traitor, then I think you would probably not say the upright. I mean, upright sounds like just a perfection. Traitor sounds like someone who's not trustworthy, and and I don't know. Like, I think it's not an obvious answer. I think like it does require thought. It's clear that one is bad and one is good, but like I think what the definitions are is not obvious.
Yeah, also traitor of what?
Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, so what is a traitor? Traitor vis-a-vis what or whom? Right. Yeah, you can't be a traitor if you're on a desert island, right? Presumably, right? You have to be a traitor to someone or to something.
Also, are we treating Yisharim and Bogdim as like separate quote unquote characters in Mishlei, or do they fit into a different type?
Nope, they are completely separate characters with their own personalities. That's what I'm nervous about for this year is are we gonna arrive at good definitions? Yeah, that's why I have two back.
Sorry.
That was a good.
I'm confused about something, but it doesn't it's not like a nice sentence. I'm just gonna
Okay,
talk.
sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I think what I'm confused about is just that like I feel like usually we would say the Tom quality of a person will lead them like to good things or
Yeah.
whatever will lead them.
Yeah.
And the crookedness of a person will devastate them or rob them.
Yeah.
Like, why is it like this quality of an already good
Okay.
person will lead
That's
them?
really good. Okay, good. I was hoping someone would ask that question. Okay, so I'm gonna insert the question here, which is what is the relationship between, and this is going to come out as also confusing. Okay, what is the relationship between the Yashar quality? So annoying. Auto caps. What is the of the Yasharim and the tam quality of the Yasharim. In other words, I think if I get what Shifra was asking, what was bothering Shifra, if I get it straight here, is that it's the tam quality. Just talk about the tam quality. Don't talk about the tam quality of the Yashar. Okay, I'll add that. Why are we focusing on the tam quality of the Yashar? Is that your question, Shifra? Okay. Yeah. In other words, it'd be like if we said, like, just to put it in terms that we're more familiar with here, if we said, the righteousness of the tzaddik, XYZ, that would make sense. We wouldn't even like question that, because the reason why we're talking about the tzaddik is because of his righteousness, But if we said like some other good quality, like if you said, for example, the chesed of the tzaddik will do something, so then why are we talking about the chesed of the tzaddik? Like, why don't we just talk about chesed, or why don't we just talk about the tzaddik? What's with this narrow focus of that? And you could say the same thing for the bogeid. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna add this. What is the self of the bogeid? So this actually works out better, which is, you could say that the self of the bogeid is what makes him a bogeid. Like whatever's causing him to be, traitorious is just the self. So I don't think it warrants asking its own thing here, but it doesn't need to be its own question. We could just say, what is self in general? What is the self of the bogdim in specific? Yeah, good question. I'm going to add a question which is not a natural question. Okay. I'm adding this because this is the first time we've encountered these two, really three Mishleic personalities. Okay. It's the Yashar is a Mishleic personality. The bogeid is another Mishleic personality. And then the tam is another Mishleic personality, even though he's not identified as a specific person here. Okay. So I'm going to ask this question just to have it on the table. We may not be able to have enough to answer it now. But since the Mefarshim deal with it, I'm going to put it here. What is the relationship between these new Mishleic personalities? Okay, namely the Tam, Yashar. It's going to capitalize, isn't it? Yashar. You know why? I wonder if it's because I've written. Okay, this is going to be weird. Rabbeinu Tam wrote a book called Sefer HaYashar, and I feel like I've written that in English many times, and maybe it's like learned to capitalize it. I don't know. Bogeid. All right. So what is the relation between these new Mishleic personalities and the old Mishleic personalities, namely the Sadiq, Rasha, Chacham, Ksiel, Eviel, those guys. Okay. And I'm just asking this because, sometimes if you see something clear when you contrast it with something that you're already familiar with. So it's not natural in the sense that it's not coming from this pasuk, but it's something that I feel like we'll be curious about. So that's why I'm listing it.
Yeah. Also, how are the bogdim devastated or robbed? And if it's robbed of what?
Yeah. Okay, good. So I will add that here. How are they being devastated or robbed? Of what? Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to put this up here also. Yeah, just so we can have all the questions there. Yeah, okay, those in order now. Do you guys remember, not all you guys, but the Shalhavit students in high school, changing the order of anything would freak people out, because they'd be taking notes and they'd write all the questions in order, and then it would freak them out. I love the fact that no one complains about this now. That's such a high school thing. Okay. Alrighty. So I feel like that's all the questions, or all the major questions, at least. I mean, we have our usual questions, which we'll ask anyway. Who is the audience? What is the practical ramification? It's funny because this question is actually more what do you call it? Natural, because we don't know much about the bogeid. For example, for all we know, maybe this is talking to the bogeid, Like, I don't know, if it was a Russia, we know it's not talking to the Russia, but we don't know where the bogeid falls out on the spectrum of Mishlei. So is he someone who can listen to this? And if the pasuk is telling him that he's going to be robbed or devastated, then that might be something he wants to know.
Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
It's interesting because it seems like, like you can have like another individual who's like an Ish Tam or an Ish Yashar.
Yeah.
Like they're both very similar. And I think that's why I first rejected Sean's question, but it seems like they're both very similar. So like, what's the difference between an Ish Yashar and Ish Tam?
Yeah. I'm gonna add that question here also. What is the difference and relationship between the Tam and the Yashar? And by the way, just to highlight the fact that they're two different people. There are pasukim that talk about them as two different people, and then also my Shalhav students will know that in Eov he's described as a Ish Tam v'Yashar Yirei Elokim v'Sor Me'Ra. So Tam and Yashar are two qualities that he has, and it's not the same thing. Yeah, sorry, Ari, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, it seems like that, like an Ish Tam would have like a Yashar quality, and an Ish Yashar would have a Tam quality. So like,
Right.
so like,
Yeah.
what is one lacking that the other doesn't?
Right. So this is part of, just to bring out another thing in the question I just typed. Are these two separate qualities, or which can exist independently of each other, or is one built upon the other? Now, if one is built upon the other, then according to our pasuk, what is built upon what?
Can I ask a variation of that question?
Yeah.
It might be also just a technical response, which is, can you technically have a bad Yashar, meaning like someone who upholds bad ideas?
That's a good question. Also, I think that is a good technical question, but I would classify it under the definition of Yashar rather than. Well, you could ask like this. You could say, "What is a Yashar?" Like, is it possible for a Yashar to be bad? Or you can ask, if the Yashar doesn't have Tamimus, then what is he? But in other words, are these two separate qualities that can exist independently of each other? Which, spoiler alert, the Malbim does say that you can have a Tam without the quality of Yashar, or the Yashar without the quality of Tam, or you can have both of them. Or according to our pasuk, you could infer that maybe the Yashar has a quality of Tamness, of Tamimus, but a Tam could be without the quality of Yashar, and that's how Rabbeinu Yonah is going to take it. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah takes it that Yashar builds upon Tam. It's a further development. Malbim says that they're two separate qualities, and you could have one without the other.
Wait, so then for the other half, for Salif and Bogdim, are we supposed to be applying like the same ideas to that, or are they meaning like the separate?
We could. Yeah, we could say that the Selef is, what question do we have that for? Selef, yeah. I'm just gonna add this here. What is the Selef Bogdim specific? Is Selef, in other words, is Selef just another term for what makes the bogeid, a bogeid, okay, i.e. his traitoriousness, or is that a word? Traitoriousness, I just spelled it wrong. Traitorousness, I thought it was traitoriousness, interesting. Or is Selef a separate imperfection for the bogeid, just like Tamimus is a separate perfection for the Yashar? Okay, is that what you're asking, Rifki? I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Oh boy, this feels like open heart surgery here. I feel like everything is like cut open and being like propped open, pinned open, or whatever surgeons do, and like it's just a mess. Okay, so I feel like See, okay, I'm almost afraid to say, okay, let's just think about it, because I feel like we need a place to start. So let's maybe just get like, is there a place that we can, or one or two questions that like we feel like we have to start with here?
One
Hey, can I
that
throw out a
resonated.
possibility?
I heard Zach first. Yeah, Zach, what did you say?
Oh, well, just one that resonated with me and that's starting to give me some thoughts is the one you asked about how do these characters differ than the ones before? Meaning like what would be wrong with this pasuk if we
Yeah.
replaced them with, Russia and Sadiq?
Yeah, I'm only laughing because that's a good question, but it's interesting that you start off there because I can see that. Yeah, okay, fine. I was gonna say like like the okay, just talking methodologically for a second here. I feel like maybe what is attracting you to that, and you tell me if you're thinking differently, is like we have some intuition just from the words, of upright or wholesome or like innocent, or traitor, and I feel like I've used this analogy before. When you go bowling as a kid, there are the things that they put in the lanes that like prevent the ball from going in, it just like bounces off. Like, so our old Mishleic definitions, if you don't know what it is, I apologize. If the old Mishleic definitions are like those bumpers that like we have this intuition, and if it gets too close to one of those old terms, then we're kind of forced to say, okay, well, what makes it different? What makes it different? So like you can kind of like whittle down, take those old terms and like whittle down. You have your intuition, and you have these terms that we're very familiar with, and you kind of like whittle down your intuition till we get something specific that is distinct from these other terms. Is that why you want to start off there, or you have a different thought process? I felt like articulating
I
that.
have an analogy. I don't really know how it relates to what you were saying, but
Sure, that's
I
fine.
sort of feel like when there's like, I feel like Mishlei is summed up to like good leads to good and bad leads to bad, but
Okay.
then it's like explaining how that process works in
Right,
like
that's a good
a
summary. Yeah.
logical process. And when you first read a pasuk, oftentimes it just seems like he's initially saying good leads to good, bad leads to bad.
Yeah.
But then in order to unpack that and understand the mechanics of it, he leaves like, it's kind of like little footholds and handholds in a wall, and like you kind of have to climb it.
Yeah.
And like each subtle clue is like a handhold that you can grab to kind of climb the wall. And that one was like such a shift in a detail that it just seemed like the easiest handhold to grab first.
Okay, that's also good. Okay, all right, good. So that's Zach's intuition. Start with what we know and work inwards. Okay, start with those handholds. Anyone else have an intuition about where to start analyzing the pasuk?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna define Tom and Yashar.
Okay, so Tom and Yashar, this is definitely a good candidate for what we have to start off with. Okay.
I was
Yeah,
3 and 5 also.
yeah,
Like,
and yeah. Um,
Just to point out that like the way I would think about it is that defining Tom and defining the terms would be
Yeah.
easiest through comparison.
right.
I would
Yeah, so
actually go
guess
for 10.
10. Okay. What makes you say that? Why?
All right. I think that like by putting in a value or like trying to
Yeah.
figure out in what way is are the bogeid robbed, then you
Yeah.
can see how everything falls in relationally to that. But I
Okay.
think that because we don't know what the nature is of like what's happening to the bogeid, we can't
Yeah.
define anything else that's happening to anybody within the pasuk.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
kind of agree with that as well, to be honest.
Wow. Okay, that's totally different than my intuition. I feel like that has to be the last step we do, because I feel like, robbing or devastating are such broad terms that unless we have some clue about who the bogeid is or what his corruption is, then we can't know what happens to him.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like I feel like it works in concert with that, meaning like that is the outcome here of the
Yeah.
puzzle. Like that is the
Yeah.
outcomes. Like working in hand with the definitions, I feel like, and then reversing that
Yeah.
makes sense to me too.
Okay, so one thing I'm realizing is everyone has different intuitions. So I guess I was I guess I was wrong to assume that we would all like end up in the same starting point. So let's do this. Okay, let's take our thinking minute. Okay, you start wherever you want. Okay, and then we'll do what we usually do of take half-baked ideas first. Okay, let's go. just one thing I want to point out, by the way, and this is already in our questions. I just want to point this out. We said, how is the Yashar guided by his Tamimus? So in question 10, it says, how are they being devastated and robbed by their selef? Okay, meaning that it's attributing the robbing to the selef, just like it's attributing the guidance to the Tamimus. So I just wanted to clear that. Okay, who's got something?
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to start with the definitions.
Okay.
You know, it could be that there are like three different people out there, and I'm gonna stick with the Tom of the Yashar for now. I don't really have a clear definition for the bogeid, but maybe you could say that the Yashar is an individual who lives life, within the law. He does what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that he can, live life, and that is it.
Okay.
Like he is upright and he's upstanding the laws.
Okay.
Right? And then you have someone who's a Tom, who not only will he, do things within the law, but he also won't undermine his values for the law.
Would you say he will not undermine his values?
Yeah, he will not undermine his values for the law.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Or
meaning, like, like he could be in a situation of like in a conflict with, like, let's say, I'm sorry, I take that back. Not against the law, but like something that would undermine his value of life, meaning like the proper way to live. Like he wouldn't like do things, to cheat in whatever area it is.
Right.
He's gonna have that integrity to the law and to his internal values, that he, like, his moral compass.
Okay, so are you just to make sure I understand what you're saying? So Yashar means you live your life based on the law. Tom means you have this integrity that you don't compromise your values or the law. So according to you, is Tom greater than Yashar?
I'm just starting something here.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I do want to point something out, by the way, that and you don't have to take this into account, but I think it's reasonable that Shlomo HaMelech is assuming that we know Torah. Okay. And in Torah, there is a pasuk of the Asisa HaYashar v'Hatov, which means going beyond the letter of the law. So in Torah language, Yashar implies not just sticking to the law; it implies going beyond the letter of the law.
So I'm gonna switch it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So Tom is sticking then to the law, and then Yashar is sticking to the law and the values. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that fits in better with Torah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Good. I was just aiming in the dark here. So I don't really.
That's fine. And do you have anything else on the puzzle? Because I think that lights up guiding them in my opinion.
So I think I answered number 3 with that definition, right?
Yes. So that because the Yashar has this quality of Tom, that he sticks to the law no matter what and has integrity, but he happens to have more than that. And what this is saying, again, I'm not going to take away the next step from you. I'm just going to set it up. I'll throw it to you. Is it's not the Yashar quality of himself that guides him, it's the Tom quality. And that's why the pasuk, that's the chiddush of the pasuk, apparently, right? That it's his Tom quality. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's like you have something that will, that's like your driving force to be like become a better person and strive further. And this is just a tool you use to guide you, not just in, this specific area, but as a whole, holistic individual that can, excel in other areas as well. That's like your pivotal point where you can use that you can use to excel in other areas.
How? I hear what you're saying, but do you have an example? Or do
Yeah,
you not,
it's like, I remember doing Hilchos Tshuva and Rabbi Traitor Shiur this year, before Yom Kippur, and one of the things we were saying is that, it was in the Rambam, there are like 6 different things and one of the things it was forgot exactly.
this is in the Rabbi Traitor Shiur on Darchei Tshuva, I think, right?
Yeah, Darchei Tshuva, right.
I didn't listen to the Shiur, but I heard about it. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I remember saying, just like the punchline is, it's your mentality that will open doors for other areas of tshuva. It's your mindset that you want to fix yourself, that you want to do tshuva, and you'll use that to better yourself in other areas.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. It's a little vague right now. So if you can tie it down to a specific example, that'd be good. But I'm gonna just ask if anyone else who is thinking along the similar lines has other answers, because when Ariel said that to me, I got a full idea in the pasuk, but I don't want to say it until I give other people a chance to say it. So if anyone else want to try to elaborate and like answer all the other questions or explain the pasuk based on this idea, how would this quality of integrity guide the Yashar if the thing that makes the Yashar really great is the fact that he is that he's sorry, not integrity, sorry. Hold on. Now I'm messed up. Ariel's saying that the Tom means that you stick to the law no matter what. You don't swerve from the law, and you have integrity in the sense of you're a law-abiding citizen, basically. Yashar is that you go beyond the law. However, the pasuk is saying that it's the law-abidingness of the Yashar that guides him. Okay, now I'm back to my idea. Okay, yeah. So how is that? Yeah, Abigail?
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure if this goes like in the exact path. It's
Sure.
very like half-baked, but I
That's fine.
was thinking, okay, about the point with like Asita Yashar Tov, I was thinking that you can a little bit get around the extrajudicial aspect of it by saying that it's the Yashar and the Tov combined that makes it extrajudicial.
Okay.
And just having the Yashar there is kind of the abiding of the law. Because I was thinking that it's kind of like the first half of the pasuk is a very passive kind of activity, that it's like this tomness that is a part of the Yashar person that guides them to have this upright sort of life. And then it's this active crookedness of a traitor. So it's like, it's an activity that produces a certain type of action,
right?
That will devastate and rob them. So it's like in opposition in that way, but they're not two opposites, if that makes any sense.
The last part, I think I followed you up until that last sentence. Just say the last sentence again.
Okay, so they're in opposition because one's like passive and one's active, but they aren't opposite ideas, because I don't think that a Yashar and a bogeid are like two opposite sorts of personalities.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure where you're seeing the passive versus active, because to me, it sounds like the Yashar and the bogeid in the pasuk are both being treated as passive. That they're either the Yashar is being guided by the Tomness, and the bogeid is being despoiled or robbed by the Selef. So both of them are like objects that are being acted upon by this quality that's in them.
Okay, I don't know. I think of like traitors as like there's some sort of activity happening there that
No,
makes
Traitor
them into
definitely
traitors.
is. Yeah. So the that part I'm on board with, is that a traitor is an active person, but what the pasuk is saying, the thing that's doing the acting in the pasuk is the Selef, or the thing that's doing the acting in the pasuk is the Tomness. You know. But I see what you're saying, that if you just take Yashar and bogeid in isolation, Yashar just refers to their qualities. Bogeid does seem to involve some like active, like traitor activity, you know? Yeah, I hear the intuition. Oh yeah, Panina.
Okay, so it's a little not complete, but
Sure.
I was thinking with Tom, like there's this idea of innocence and simpleness. So maybe
Yeah.
it's someone who's the way they think is simple and innocent, so very black and white. And so
Yeah.
Yashar is a more nuanced view.
Okay, that's good.
And then a traitor, it's a traitor to their own ideas. Like they're not black and white. They don't have that kind of like consistency. So they betray their own ideas, and that causes devastation.
That's interesting. Okay, so this is a really interesting triplicate division here, right? So you have okay, hold on a second. Could you maybe play that through in an example? Just like take an example and then just show what the Tom would do, what the Yashar would do, and then what the bogeid would do, if you're at that point of development yet in your idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't. So, like, for example, they're talking about maybe a transaction, just because I feel like that
Sure.
might be the easiest to explain. So someone who's very simple sees it either as this is a good transaction or this is a bad transaction, while someone who's Yashar has more nuance to it and says this is a bad. Generally, this would be a good transaction, but in this moment, it's a bad transaction, and so like they're able to see the nuance. But the crooked person just sees, like, betrays their own ideas. So even if they think it's like a bad transaction, usually, but if there's some kind of incentive for them this specific time, they'll do the transaction anyway.
Right. Okay. I see. All right. That is clear. Okay. I like that. That application. It's not 100% clear in my mind, but I like I like it structurally. Rifki, were you going to add to that, or you had a different idea?
I was actually going to say something very similar to what Panina was saying.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah. Just put it on the table. Yeah.
So I was just thinking that with like the quality of Tom, that in order for, I'm not sure if this is actually true, obviously, but I was just thinking that in order for someone to become like a Yashar, that you need that quality of Tom. Like, I feel like I was just thinking about like real world examples, and that's say for like a leader, like you can't have someone that's just like only following like what they think is right. Like you need some type of like moral, whatever, if it's like religion or like politics, whatever it is, you need something to stabilize you. So in order for you to get to the point where you can lead people, you not only need to have like your own creative ideas and your own way of interpreting it, but first you have to have like that first like law abiding, like, you know, stabilizing thing, or else you won't actually become like a definitional Yashar or whatever. Right.
Okay, good. I hear that. That's a good thing. To me, that also sounds a little bit like Ariel's direction. So I'm not sure what the Ariel, you want to comment on that observation?
Yeah, it turns out that's like exactly what I was gonna say from my direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to, kind of define exactly what each, Tom would have. He would, in a certain sense, he has like a certain, integrity to his, lifestyle.
Yeah.
And each Yashar, I guess he wouldn't necessarily have an Ish Yashar cannot be an Ish Yashar without that Mida. It's like a starting point.
Yeah, I'm still undecided about that. I mean, I liked the way you said it initially, but now I'm not sure. Like it's possible that you could, like what Rifki said, open up this possibility to me that it's possible you can. Okay, let me give an example, and this is going to resonate definitely with Rifki, but it's more in line with Panina's idea, I think. Arguably, Thomas Jefferson was a Yashar and not a Tom. Okay, which is ironic because he's fine. I didn't mean that. But like, in other words, it's very easy to be very idealistic about things, but not have an internal consistency of like that bedrock thing of like, so you end up in like these contradictions where, again, I'm throwing this example. I apologize if people aren't familiar with the facts, but like, whatever, this works for right now, is like, to write that all men are created equal, but then to like not make a final move of getting rid of the slaves, or like to be very, very against like government seizing power, and then to like make the Louisiana Purchase like on his own, like this huge overreach, you know. So like they're in order for, so and it doesn't mean that it can't end up being good. Like you can be Yashar and end up doing good, but unless you have that foundation of the Tom, then it's not going to end up being, you're not going to end up getting to your destination in a reliable way, which is maybe why it's saying that it's the Tomness of, it's the Tmimus of the Yashar that it will allow him to have that will really be the thing that keeps him on track. You know, that Tanchem, in other words, Tanchem might not mean guiding him, like giving him a direction to go in, but keeping him on the path. You know, like again, like the pasuk I know that is uses this word is Yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'man shemo, that he will keep me on you know, straight paths, you know, on upright paths.
Wait, so just,
yeah,
I think I get what you're saying, and it may have sparked another idea. But are you saying that, you know, you can have an individual who may think at a very high level in terms of, you know, whatever, abstractly or philosophical or whatever, but there's another element, is that you need to execute it. You need to execute that idea.
No, I'm saying that I mean, this does have to do with execution, but I'm saying that you need to be able to have this lawful way of thinking. That is what you were saying the Tamimus was, in order for your Yashar quality to hit its mark. Like again, this is going to be I don't know how many people are going to get this, but like you need a James Madison to like to harness the Thomas Jefferson visionary thing in order for it to be successful. I got to think of you know, I'm going to call him Zach, but I think of a more accessible analogy. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
So this is kind of a different idea. It overlaps with what Panina was saying, and
Sure.
how she was seeing things, but it goes in a different direction overall.
Yeah, sure. And I just want, before you say it, I just want to say for this pasuk, I am loosening the ordinary like procedure that we have of like fully fleshing out an idea first, because I feel like these ideas are so complicated. We have to get all of our intuitions out on the table, and then we'll see like what is similar and what is not, then we'll coalesce into different approaches. So yeah, go ahead, Zach.
For me, I guess I'll start with the second half, with the bogeid, and I think I'm looking at him as a person who, like the crookedness I'm looking at is the inability to completely tie the like present and the future.
Okay.
So he struggles to see how something right now is going to affect his future existence, let's say.
Okay.
And so because of that, he'll come into situations where he'll be overwhelmed by the situation and make a decision against his own best interests.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that I was thinking of is like cheating in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is common in like a secular modern culture, where people will be overwhelmed by a scenario and then regret it later and feel devastated that they ruined their life.
Right.
And so they were being a traitor in that situation, but what led them to that was there was this overwhelming situation where they fail in that moment. They failed to see how what they were doing right then was going to devastate them and how they would be so upset later.
Mm-hmm.
And so now going to the first pasuk, and also just to clarify, the reason why that's different than like a Russia is that this is a specific quality of like being challenged in connecting the present and the future, rather than like a systematic evil view or evil intention.
Right. So my question, before you go to the first half, my question was not going to be how is this different from the Russia. My question is going to be how is this different from the fool, because the hallmark of the Mishleic fool is not connecting the present and the future, you know.
So I'd have to think about that. That might be where I'd need to.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer that
Out more, but
yeah.
that's a good question. So then in the first half, the Yashar is someone who has a straight view, and he sees exactly how the present connects to the future.
Yeah.
And for him, he won't fall into that trap of betraying his own best interests.
Mhm.
And Shlomo's explaining to us how, like, the mechanics of that is coming through his Tom quality, which my thinking is that he, when you're used to separating between the two, like, so the analogy I thought of is that in even like business law, like there was in class, the professor pointed out that, like, you have to weigh out the pros and cons of breaking the law, you know. Like, you might break the law and get fined, but if the business benefit was worth it, then that was a good decision, you know. Which is like a crooked way of thinking, in a sense, meaning like,
Right.
and so if you're so used to not thinking crookedly and not trying to say, well, oh, is this short-term bad decision worth this long-term effect, but you're used to having a straight mindset, then even in a situation where you would theoretically be overwhelmed by the scenario, there's going to be this, like, innocence, so to speak, that is going to be surprised by it because you're not used to thinking like that. So, like, even if someone, like, let's go back to the cheating scenario where, like, if you're so used to thinking straight, then in a case where you have an opportunity to cheat and that normally might overwhelm a person's mind and senses, they would be so surprised and shocked by the scenario and that idea that they would refrain. And that's what will help guide them through those otherwise overwhelming scenarios.
That's interesting. Meaning, so I'm just not 100% sure I understand you use the word shocked. Like, is it the sense that, like, to them, then the notion of, like, breaking the law is, like, unthinkable, and they wouldn't do that? Like, what's the yeah, I'm just not.
So I wasn't thinking of this in terms of law necessarily, but maybe I should try to frame it that way. But to me, I was just kind of sticking with this example just because it's so drastic, which is like a person who is used to thinking of, like, oh, can I get away with it? Is it worth it? That's like a good way of thinking. So in the moment, they're going to be busy playing through, like, is it worth it? Is it not? And then the overwhelming situation will, like, take over.
And once you're in that realm of calculations of is it worth it or is it not, so then you're almost already lost, or you're already, like, prone to the.
You'll lose in specific. I don't know if you'll always lose, but you'll lose in those scenarios where you're going to be overwhelmed. Whereas,
well, I guess what I'm saying is certainly in the long run, you're going to end up falling into these scenarios and then losing because you immediately get caught up in that calculation, you know.
Right, and meaning, like, if you're always thinking that way, maybe you'll come to the right conclusion again and again and again, but eventually you'll hit a situation where the short term is so tantalizing and so overwhelming and so amazing that you'll lose track of that calculation. Whereas a Yashar, he might also lose track of that calculation, but because he's used to avoiding those calculations and just sticking on that straight calculation of, like, what the, like, meaning that, like, a bad moral decision now would be bad for the future, and he just knows that and sticks with a moral like equation, so to speak, then even in the moments where he's going to be overwhelmed by a situation, his like emotional mental state of mind won't be easily overwhelmed, because he'll have, like, a revulsion, let's say, like, he'll have this moment of, like, what, like, no way, you know. And that quality is the quality that Shlomo's pulling out to say that, like, a Yashar will have to guide him.
Okay, I think I hear your approach now. Yeah, Rivki?
Yeah, so I think that this is like a combination of what Zach and Panina were saying and, like, a little bit of what I was saying before. And I think that, like, something that I think is true, that what the pasuk is saying is that a quality that both of them have but taken very different directions is, like, that quality of, like, not going away from the law, but interpreting the law in, like, a specific way. Whereas, like, for the first half of the pasuk, they're solid enough in the law. And like that's what I was saying before, that they do have that like solid interpretation that they can take it in a way that even though they're not going by the letter of the law, they're still doing it in a way that's like justice and like all of that. Whereas bogedim aren't doing that, and they might think like, oh, like, you know what, I have like this interpretation. And like you can even think about this in terms of like Esav and Yaakov, how like, you know, I've heard before that Esav really like believed in what he was doing, and like he really thought like that he had like a correct view of Judaism. And we obviously know like Yaakov had that same view. And obviously, like, I'm not saying like each of them fit these characters, but I think it's a good analogy in terms of like thinking that you're doing the right thing and interpreting in the correct way. But clearly the bogedim don't have that like solid like quality that the Tom has, or that the like Yashar has of Tomness. And yeah, so I'm just saying it's interesting that I think that it's the same quality, but they just don't have the Tomness, which makes them like crooked.
Yeah. So when you say they, you mean the Yashar and the bogeid have the same quality because they're both trying to go beyond.
Exactly.
So that's very close to what I'm thinking as well, which I'm viewing as an extension of Ariel's. Maybe that's just because I don't understand the other ones as much. But let's go to Ariel and then Penina, and then I'll say what I'm trying to.
Can I jump in very briefly?
Sure. Yeah.
Just to answer like that spark, what Rifki was saying sparked an answer to your question about what's the difference between the fool and the bogeid.
Okay.
Is that the fool might have a disconnect between the present and the future, whereas the bogeid's disconnection between the present and the future, it still involves a calculation, meaning he thinks about it, but he thinks he needs to think about that.
Right.
So there's a possibility.
So the fool is just unthinking. Right. He's just totally caught in the present. Yeah. Okay, Ariel.
Yeah. Another question, that just came up was, what if the law is against someone's values?
Right.
And
so
let's say that the law is not necessarily a just law. It's not objectively just, but it undermines, the value system of the individual. Like for instance, like when Rivki brought in, Yaakov and Esav, like the classic case is Yaakov kind of had to deceive his father a little bit.
Right.
I'm saying,
right.
Like, yeah, you get the question, right?
Yeah, I get the question. Yeah. And so I think it's a good question. I don't think it's a question that we should deal with now, because that's really asking about like, an exceptional case. And this is the first pasuk where we're encountering these personalities, So I feel like this is going to be a basic idea about this. And that question should be dealt with when we have a clearer idea. It's possible we'll be able to answer it once we get this, but I'm saying I don't think our pasuk is presuming that we're in that case.
Right. And another thing I wanted to say was, in terms of like the ish Tom.
Yeah.
I tried to answer this before, but maybe you could say that the Tom, he has a certain integrity to the law, right? Yeah. But now the Ish Yashar, he will use the same integrity that he would have for the law, but he would apply that for everything else.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That was
yes.
I think we're on the same. I think we're on the same track here. I just want to spell that out, and then I'll call you Penina. I just want to spell it for the first half at least. Is the Tom has this integrity of operating lawfully, okay? And if the Yashar, I still think it fits in with what Rivki was saying, but like the Yashar has ideals and is striving to go beyond the letter of the law, but unless he continue, in order to succeed, he has to continue to operate in that lawful integrity based manner. Otherwise, he's just going to veer off and be like someone who has lofty ideals and then just doesn't actually apply them, and then I feel like we can explain the second half with that also, but I'm going to hold off for a second. Yeah, Penina.
So I kind of think it fits into what I was saying as well.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I sense that also. I just can't. I can't put it in those terms yet. Yeah.
So when I was thinking of it, I wasn't necessarily thinking in terms of law, but I think the idea still can apply, where it's more about like the internal like logic of the person. So a Tom has a very simple internal logic of black and white. This is good. This is bad. Yeah. When a Yashar is able to see that there's black and white, but that there's more instances of gray in the world, and can make those nuanced decisions. And then where the traitor is going, where the betrayal is happening for the bogeid, is that it's also kind of like he betrays his own internal logic.
Mhm.
So
Okay, right.
he's trying to also make some external type of decision similar to the Yashar, but he has none of the background, I guess you could say, in the law, but just in general, he betrays his own internal logic, and that's where the betrayal is.
Okay, that is much clearer in my mind. Not saying it wasn't clear before, but I see the connection now more. I think it's interesting, by the way, that tell me if this is accurate, Nina. I feel like Ariel and I are focusing more on Tom as like integrity, and you're focusing more on Tom as like a type of simplicity or wholesomeness. Or
Yes, but there's also a sense of integrity in that simpleness, right? If
right,
everything is
in the
black and
statement
white,
black
there's
and
a
white.
certain-
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, meaning that it's an integrity that would make him shy away from trying from complexities and shades of gray. Like, you know, like that's he's going to err on the side of white if he or black if he finds a shade of gray. You know,
Right, and to use your like Thomas Jefferson example, it
Yeah.
would be Thomas Jefferson not making any of those decisions like the Louisiana Purchase, even though technically that was clearly a good thing that he had done. Looking back, it went against what he originally had thought. So if
right?
it was someone who was strictly a Tom, they wouldn't have made that
Yeah.
decision.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, Sean.
All right, I kind of have a completely different approach that shares some similarities,
Okay, go ahead.
but I'm not sure if you want me to go into it.
Can I just define bogeid?
Yeah, why don't you hold
within-
off on it for a second, Sean? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
Ariel. No, I think what I want to do is I want to hear what Ariel has to say, and then if Zach is also elaborating, I want to do that. But then I want to go to the Malbim because this is very dancing around the Malbim, and I think maybe even reading the Malbim will either he's on the same track or he'll help us put what we're saying, you know, the cluster of us into better terms. Yeah, Ariel, go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to define bogeid for a second. Maybe a bogeid is just a two-faced individual.
Okay.
Meaning he says one thing, but he does something else. He's crooked. He's just wait for a second. He's crooked because he's just distorting his own agenda, and that's gonna hurt him because that's how people will perceive him in the future. Meaning he'll never be true to his word. He'll never be true to his nature, and he'll never be true to his value. And he's just gonna good, and that crookedness will undermine. And that crookedness will devastate and rob him for other future possibilities because he will be exposed.
I mean, the thing I don't like about that, and maybe it's just I'm not understanding it, is the way that Penina and the way that Rifki were explaining the second half is it fit in very well with the first half as like these are three personalities that all relate to each other. I don't see what two-facedness has anything to do with the first half.
Well, he's not. He doesn't have any. He has what's the antithesis of integrity? I don't know. Dishonesty. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's like the complete opposite of not just the law and his values, but to everything he stands for.
Is it really is two-facedness really the opposite of this kind of integrity? Like, I mean, what if he's two-facedness on in allegiance to his own principles? Like, you know,
isn't that the same thing?
No, because two-facedness has to do with how you relate to other people.
Well,
the opposite of integrity is being a hypocrite.
Can I redefine two-faced then?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be to other people. It could be to himself too. And what
I don't know what that means. Is that the same thing as a hypocrite? I don't understand what that means. Or inconsistent? Like,
yeah, he's inconsistent.
Okay, so what's the idea of being a traitor then?
He's a traitor. He's a traitor himself. He's a traitor of what he stands for. I was saying you have those people.
Yeah.
It's like if I make a law that everyone should be vaccinated, but and if I don't vaccinate myself, like that's nuts.
Yeah, something is, I don't know. I'm having a hard time seeing it as applied here, but I'm going to go ahead and let's just move on to Zach. I really want to get to the Malbim so we can give Sean a chance to say his possibly radically different idea. Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Mine is just kind of embellishing on what Penina was saying, maybe with borrowing a little bit of the other thoughts, but just like it kind of clicked a little bit. which is that it seems like maybe there's a similarity between a bogeid and a Yashar in the sense that they're
Yeah.
both calculating personalities.
Yeah.
And whereas a bogeid gets lost in the shades of gray, a Yashar is a calculating person who can fall back on the black and whiteness of their, Tom quality.
Yeah.
And so then when they run into a problematic shade of gray, they can just fall back on that simplicity and just
Right.
go with the good side, basically.
Yeah.
Where the bogeid gets lost.
Just to give a good example of that, which I think we can relate to, is take a person who has Torah and mitzvos as their foundation and is a Yashar, versus someone who does not have Torah and mitzvos as the foundation. So the person who has Torah and mitzvos as the foundation may be like, let's say they confront a case where what they should do is not very clear, so they might be tempted to work out what would be good in this case. But at the end of the day, they have halacha to fall back on, and they can fall back on that. And it might not be the best thing to do in this case. It might not be like addressing the particulars of the case, but you can't go entirely wrong if you're just falling back on halacha. Whereas if you don't have that to fall back on, so then you're just spinning, or you're just going to be a victim of whatever whim is possessing you at the time, something like that.
Yeah, maybe a common example is I feel like there's a certain archetype of movie where the villain and the protagonist are both trying to do good, and the villain has this calculation, and they end up straying into these very immoral kinds of behaviors because they had this elaborate calculation.
Yeah.
Whereas the protagonist at some point says no, stop, this is insane and bad, and has that
you're becoming the very thing that you all set out to destroy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that right. They're falling back on that Tom quality by their response.
Right. I hear. Okay, let's do this. Let's look at the Malbim. Okay. And again, I just glanced at the Malbim, but it feels like it should be relevant. Okay. And if it's not, then I'll cry. And then we'll go to Sean. All right. So the Malbim says like this. So we're going to actually read the Malbim on Mishlei 2:7, only because that's the first time he talks about Tom and Yashar. So he says like this: Geder Yasharim Shehim Yasharim Betivam. Oh my, maybe this is not relevant. Oh no, hold on. Maybe only half of it's relevant. Bein besichlam ubinasam bein b'midosehem. Okay, so this part might not be relevant, but the Yashar, he says, is someone who by nature is upright, whether in their intellect and understanding or in their midos. The Geder, okay, this is the part that I wanted to get. The Geder Tamimim Shema'asem Kavuim al Matzav Echad. Their actions are literally Kavuim, are established in one setting, I guess, one matzav, one situation. Osim hakol l'shem shemayim v'lo yamutu ma'aseim. They do everything for the sake of heaven. I don't know exactly what he means by that, and they don't deviate in their actions. And he says, "V'yitzuyir yasharim bilti tamimim v'chein behefech." And you can have people who are yashar who are not tamim, and the opposite, people who are tamim and not yashar. So that's one presentation. Let's just do one more, and then we'll try to put it together. And we're not going to read his commentary on our pasuk yet. We're just going to do his definitions. In our psukim, he says, "Hayashar mitzayin misha sichla umidos of yasharim beteva." So Yashar is someone whose intellect and midos are naturally upright. Who gadol me'at tzadik shu kovish kinizka le'el. So he says he's greater than tzaddik. This is in the Malbim's terminology. I don't know about our terminology. He says it's greater than tzaddik because he says a tzaddik conquers his inclination, meaning he has an inclination otherwise, but he forces his actions to be in line with justice. But a Yashar, his emotions are in line with what is just, or with what is good. Tom matayin hamase hakvua bli shinoi. Tom means action that is set without change, uvli panaya, and without turning. V'tzadik tamim hainu she'omid tamim al matzav echad ba yimot b'shum zmanu v'chom. Okay, fine. So what he's saying, again, this is not exactly the direction we're going, but he is saying that Tom has that quality of not deviating, and Yashar means that you are drawn to the good in your midos and in your intellect. And again, so the Tom part is the part that really does seem to be on the track that we're taking. The Yashar is interesting because he's saying that you can have someone who is drawn to the good, but without that discipline of of consistency in action, then you might not really get the results that are the best. So if I were to guess what the Malbim says on this pasuk, it does turn out very similar to what like Ariel was saying, I think, or Ariel, Rifki, I've lost track of who's are similar now. Is that that being a Yashar is great in the sense of if you have this very visionary thing in terms of what is good, and if your emotions and intellect are drawn there, but unless you have that consistency in how you operate, then your vision of the good will not be implemented and result in the good. So that's all I have from the Malbim for that. Again, that's without looking at his interpretation.
Question: could we, when he talks about the Yashar like being
Yeah.
naturally drawn to good, does he mean literally naturally, like born that way, or does he mean like he's come to state, he's like evolved?
Yeah, I would sense it could be what do you call either, like I would guess it's more commonly that you train yourself and you've rerouted your emotions in line with what's good, whereas the Sadiq is still in conflict according to him. Like he knows what's good and he acts in line with what's good, but he's still in conflict. Should we read what he says on our pasuk while we're here, and then we'll go back to Sean and we'll try to put everything together? Anyone
I kind of want to hear Sean's first, though.
Okay, all right. So let's hear Sean's first. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
All right, sure. So I'm going to lay out a few things and I'll actually go through how everything works. Right. So
Okay.
firstly, I would say that I'm defining Tom similarly, I think, to how a lot of people have is like integrity. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that crookedness is the absence of integrity.
Okay.
And that what is being robbed of them is the leading that is coming for the Yasharim
Okay.
from Tom.
Nice conservative interpretation so far. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say, what about integrity leads a person? Right. So I would say people can have values, right? But if they don't have the integrity of the values, meaning they don't have the willpower towards those values, right? So then the values they're not going to be drawn after their values, right? But a person's willpower, their like integrity towards these values makes it so that the only thing that they're being drawn towards is the things in which they value, right? But a person who doesn't have that integrity, right? In a sense, they're going to be crooked because there's nothing drawing them to their values. And so they might have values, right? But when they, in a sense, betray those values or are not integral towards their integrity towards those values becomes compromised, right? So then those values aren't possible for them, right?
Right.
And then I think what the big chiddush of the pasuk, what it's addressing is that when you lose that integrity, as like integrity is something separate from your values, right? It's what makes your values impactful and like possible for you. Right. So when you betray your integrity in terms of the things that you value, it's not just that like this one thing, like I say, okay, I'm going to like make an exception here. Right. But when you make an exception in terms of your integrity, because it is a standalone thing, right, that devastates your entire integrity, right? It's a compromising of your entire integrity, which means that for your other values, it's going to have an effect on. So you would think just in this action, right? Okay, I'll betray my values like in this instance, right? But in all other instances, I'll be fine. But because Tomness is something that's separate from, right, the values of a person, right? It's going to make it so that they can't be upright because it's going to impact them across the board.
That's a really good idea. Okay, that's a really good idea. All right, so let me try stating it and make sure I got it. Okay, so the quality of the Tom is integrity, which is your you had an interesting way of putting it. How do you say it in relation to your values?
Like willpower, the amount of willpower that you have that you can employ towards your values.
Right. Meaning, and the opposite of that would be, and just I guess to talk about the bogeid would be like, there are lots of people who have values, but they completely don't act on them. So it's great that you have values, that you like intellectually hold these positions, but like it's worth nothing if it's not actually like impacting your actions. Okay, fine. So, and that's the bogeid, and the bogeid have no well, actually, I'm gonna go in the order of the puzzle because I think it's easier to understand. I liked how you presented it, but so the audience of the puzzle is someone who has values and integrity, and thinks that he can make an exception in a case without harming anything. But what ends up, and he says, because, okay, fine, like the way he views it is like, I have my values, and like this one case, like, okay, I get a 99% instead of 100%, something like that, you know? But what happens is once he compromises his integrity and that no longer is there, so then that runs the risk of making the value something which is purely an abstraction in his mind, or purely like an idea, and not something that actually affects him. Like, values are nothing unless you are living by them. So once you make an exception and you impair that integrity, you've really like endangered the entire like enterprise, and you're gonna not have that guidance anymore. In other words, you're not gonna you're like let me just talk it out in different language here. A person who has integrity, it's not a choice. Like, if you talk to people who really have integrity, it's like and you're like, oh, you're so great for like like sticking to your values. And a person with real integrity is like, no, like, it's not a choice. Like, this is actually like, what choice do I have other than to be good and honest and just, But once you make an exception, what you've essentially done is you've made it all into choices. You've made it all into just, I'm going to choose this, choose this, choose this, choose this. And then the integrity is no longer guiding you, and then you're gonna lack that. And then you're going to lack all of the positive results that come from having these values. In other words, you think you're upholding the values and just getting a quantitatively fewer results, but really you're undermining the fuel that runs the entire operation, and the values won't have their effect on the world. I know that
can I add one piece to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. It's that when you betray yourself in one instance, you, in a sense, define yourself as someone who can become corruptible, or who can betray their values. Right. The person who says, I can never betray my values. Right. So every single time one of his values is questioned, it's like Pasha that he's not going to betray his values. But the second he betrays it one time, he recognizes that he has within himself the ability to betray his values. And that like undermines fundamentally his integrity.
Man, that is a scary idea. And that's how you know it's true. That is how you know it's true. Yeah, Zach?
Can I maybe, like, I really like the idea, but that last thing I want to challenge a little bit.
Sure.
Just because the overall structure I think is fantastic. Like, I enjoy that thought.
Yeah.
It's just that he talks about crookedness, meaning as like it sounds like more like a mindset than a one-time choice or instance. Yeah. And I agree that it's dangerous to do that once, but I sort of feel like saying that doing it once undermines everything is a bit like, it feels like not really a Jewish way of thinking. Meaning, like, I feel like a Jewish way of thinking is like a righteous person can fall and stand back up. Like there's this idea that you can make mistakes and still improve and still recover. And so I sort of feel like, just completely keeping everything Sean's saying, just like a way to rephrase that one point could be that, like, once you start accepting that you can choose whether it's an exception or not, like once you start choosing and like thinking about, whether or not it's worth sticking with your values or not, once you challenge your integrity, then the ability for your values to guide you is gone.
Right. And I think that's a good modification. I mean, Sean, you can jump in also, but I don't think Sean meant that like, that's it, you're finished. You could do teshuva on not having integrity, but insofar as you have not done, I think it ends up in the same place, but again, Sean can jump in. Insofar as you are relating to your integrity that way, your integrity is as good as worthless.
Yeah, I would say, in response to Zach, I would say that like his integrity could be like now at 90% efficiency, right? But the fact that you've compromised your integrity is going to impact you across the board, and you can work on that. You can bolster and like reinforce your integrity, right? But it's that like the impact that your integrity has is in a sense diminished, not just in this one action, but across the board. And that's something that you're going to need to now restore in order to be more effective in your values across the board.
Yeah. I wouldn't even, I mean, that's one way to put it. And I don't know if what I'm saying is just the same thing in different words. It makes your integrity like an unstable basis. and therefore unable to guide you, like the guidance power of integrity is the fact that it is without exception, and once you allow exceptions into it, it can't be the thing that guides you anymore, because now everything is a separate choice.
So I just have a quick question on Sean's idea. So what is the crookedness again?
Yeah, you want to answer it, Sean?
Yeah, I was just defining crookedness as the absence of integrity, or like a lacking in integrity.
Yeah.
Right. That once integrity becomes compromised, then that results in crookedness, and so that's what it's calling this reality.
So so the question, so Zach's question is, when is that point? When is that lack of integrity, the integrity compromised?
When is the integrity
Well, I
compromised?
think I was just pointing out, and I mean, I think it works out, but like, I think I was just pointing out that it's the state of mind more than the individual action. Meaning, like, Sean was pointing out in response that like that action triggers a state of mind, but it's the state of mind that is undermining.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if this will help, but this might help both of you. I mean, Zach, I definitely spoke about this with you a couple years ago. I mean, there is a Gemara that says, the difference between Jews and non-Jews, thinking about the Chay versus, doing them. If a non-Jew thinks about the Chay, and it's as if he did it. But even if a Jew does it once or twice, it's not as he could still go back. It's only up until I don't remember if it was the second or third time, then he can't go back anymore. So at that point, that's when like the mindset kind of hits. But up until that point, like you're like, you could either go to the left or to the right. It's more about, I think that could be a good combination to answer both of your questions.
I didn't get that, and I also don't want to bring in the midrash. It's going to complicate things. I just want to make one observation just really quickly, just from let's just stop and take a step back for 1 second. What I really am liking about this entire pasuk is, according to this is a completely different realm of Mishleic qualities than Sadiq, Russia, and Chacham and Fool. In other words, this has to do with like your internal dynamics and how your values translate into actions, as opposed to what your values are, which is like the Sadiq and the Russia really were more about how they relate to the system. This is really more about how their actions relate to their internal, I don't know, their internal system. I don't know exactly how to put it, but just wanted to throw that out there just to make an observation.
I guess that's sparking a question is like, in Sean's view, what's the difference between the Yashar and the Sadiq? Meaning, like, why not just say the Tam quality of a Sadiq will lead them and guide them? Meaning, like, it seems like we're focusing on the Tam quality here. So why say Yashar?
You can answer that if you want, Sean. I have an answer, but
go ahead and answer. I have like a little something, but like I want to think it out a little bit more.
I just think that according to the way we're going right now, this quality is not unique to a tzaddik. Like this is a quality of this could be a quality of like a chacham, or like a good businessman, or like a good skilled craftsman, or like this is it just really, it doesn't have to do with
Right.
your relation. That's what I was trying to allude to when I'm saying it doesn't have to do with your relationship to the system or your view of yourself in the system. That just has to do with your relationship to the behavior that you continually engage in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Sean, what were you going to say?
I think pretty much along those lines. I was just like figuring out how to formulate it.
Okay, sure. All right. So here's what let's do. Let's just try to summarize this very concisely, and then we can officially end this year. But I really do want to see what one of the Mefarshim says. So I'd like to go to the Malbim after that, and then just read it and see if we get anything new out of it, because I'm just very excited that we're like in new Mishleic territory here. Okay, so let me try stating it as concisely as I can, and if I can't, then I'm going to ask Sean to do it, because I think his initial thing was clearer than my attempt to summarize it again. So, Tumas Yesharim Tanchem V'Selef Bogim Yishadem. The integrity of those with good values will guide them, which really means will make them effective, right, in implementing those values. And the lack of integrity in bogeid, which that's one part I still want to try to get sharper, will rob them of that guidance. So what does this mean? It means that or what's the idea? The idea is that values that you have in your mind and in your heart are worthless unless they can be implemented. And the consistency and integrity of what makes values is that they are what determine your actions. So if you're allowing exceptions to your values, then they will not function as values and therefore will not have the effect that you want them to have in the world. And that's what the second half of the pasuk is saying, that if you lack integrity, you will ipso facto be a traitor a traitor to your values that does not implement them in the world, you know? And again, this could be real lofty values of chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat, like in terms of Mishleic stuff. Or again, it could even be values like, again, let's say you are let's say you're a craftsman and like you have a certain standard of product that you're creating and you cut corners every once in a while, you know? So what's going to happen is you can tell yourself all day long, I care about good craftsmanship, but I just did a rush job on this one. But once you are in that territory, so then you aren't a craftsman that cares about good craftsmanship, because if you were, you wouldn't have made that exception. Like you clearly don't. And then once you've opened that door, so now everything does end up becoming a separate decision, and the integrity is not guiding you anymore. It's just, you know, it's like it reminds me of what Rav Pesach said once about like the nature of laws. Is the nature of laws is that they are universal and without exception. And like, you know, like if you like, you so we have like speed limits, you know, like you know, 55 miles per hour, like, you know, that's the law. It's universal, no exceptions. If you start making exceptions, and well, I'm going to make exception here. So if you just had a sign that says drive at the speed that says that you think will make you safe, that's not a law anymore. Like you're no longer operating based on laws. And that's really like what ends up happening if you relegate your decision. Like if you unhitch your decision making from integrity of good values to individual judgments, then you've just like you've lost that track. You've gone off track, which is why it uses the Tonkin. Okay, that got really inarticulate at the end, but I think am I missing any element of the idea there, Sean, or anyone?
I thought of maybe a simple way to sum it up.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, simple
which
better.
Is like the in order to get the benefits that your morals and values will provide, you need to be able to stick to them.
Yes,
and
that's
when
the way
you're unable to stick to it, then you'll be devastated that you don't get those benefits.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a very concise way to say it. Okay, good. That was a good idea. Good. I feel like you know, Sean, you really pulled it together, but I feel like all the talk about integrity like really paved the way for it. like it got the juices running. Yeah. Okay. I still think there is merit, by the way, in the other idea. I just want to try saying the other idea now and see what happens now that we've had this idea. The other idea is that Tom means integrity in the sense of sticking to the law, and the Yashar is the person who wants to go beyond the law to do good, and the bogeid is going to be the one who wants to undermine the law to do something in particular. So that's like what Rivki was talking about, that both the Yashar and the bogeid want to go beyond the law. The Yashar wants to do better than the law can do, and the bogeid wants to undermine the law and just wants to do whatever he wants to do. So what it's saying is that the Yashar is only going to be able to do this if he operates lawfully when he tries to go beyond the law. You know, he can't just like arbitrarily say, well, I want good, I'm just gonna like zap it into existence like with a magic wand. You know, you know, in order for it to be effective, he's going to have to like think it out and operate in a lawful way. So it's it's the foundation of lawfulness that got him to the point of being a yashar, of going beyond the law, that will allow him to like go beyond that. And I'll give you just an example of this. Pirkei Avos is about going beyond the letter of the law, but the people who are implementing Pirkei Avos are people who are used to operating by chachma and by principles. And when they go beyond the law, they'll do it in a principled way. They won't do it in a haphazard way, or in an arbitrary way, or in a reckless way, Like I'll give you like a dumb example of this would be, let's say someone wants to, here's a good example, right? Is there are people who want to do chesed for like countries in Africa, so they just send a bunch of stuff into Africa, not looking about like whether this is what the people actually, not looking at what people actually need. That's going to be a lack in the tzedakah. Let's say they fail to take into account the fact that there are corrupt governments there that are going to basically like interfere with the ability of these goods to get where they need to go, and and there's cultural elements that you have to take into account. In other words, a real person who's trying to go beyond the letter of the law and to do chesed for a community that has nothing to do with him will operate in a lawful way to try to make sure that this is just that this is going to get to where it needs to go in the proper way, not just arbitrarily fling goodness like confetti and just hope that it falls in the right place. That was a weird example, but okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Are you finished? I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm finished. Yeah.
Right, cool.
That was just a half idea.
So Sean, it's a question for you. Where did you start? Did you start by the definition, or did you start by your initial approach answering question number 10?
I think it was a mixture of defining Tom and what is the robbing, and then kind of I tried to be as conservative and get as much squeeze out every bit I could from the pasuk before bringing in external things. And
that's the derech. That's again that was the thing that I had the hardest time with when I was first learning Mishlei, and Rabbi Moskowitz always used to have to give me tochacha of stick to what's in the pasuk. And that move, I mean, I said when you made the move that's a very conservative interpretation of rob them of what? Well, what is there in the pasuk that they could be robbed of? Well, they could be robbed of the guidance. That was a nice slick move. Yeah. Okay, let's look at the Meiri and just see or the Malbim and just see what happens. Okay, again, I'm not promising anything here. We'll save the Rabbeinu Yonah essay for some other time. Okay, Malbim says like this. Yesh hevdel bein Yasharim letzadikim. There's a difference between Yasharim and Tzadikim. Shah Yashar hu mi shelibo holech b'derech Yashar. Yashar is someone whose heart goes on the upright path. Bein be'emunos v'deos uvinyane habina, whether in beliefs and opinions and matters of understanding. Sha'al ze ba l'rov milas Yashar al habina, because Yashar usually applies to understanding. Bein al hamidos v'hamasim shesharashim b'chachma, or whether it is on midos and actions that are rooted in chachma. And in regards to Chachma, he is different from the tzaddik. Because the Yashar, his nature is inclined to the good from the uprightness that is implanted in him. The tzaddik ose kain, but the tzaddik does this. Oh, never mind, Zach. This is different than what I said. The tzaddik is doing it because he has learned righteousness and has been habituated to it. I don't know, maybe it could go both ways. That the tzaddik has conquered his inclination and habituated himself to be contrary to his nature. Yashar tivo came, but the Yashar's nature is like this. So right now it does sound like he's saying that Yashar is naturally drawn to the good. The tzaddik has to work on it and rewire his own habits. Gam shehayashar ino mabit al chukos hatzedek. That's interesting. So the Yashar is not looking at the laws of justice or of righteousness, but he's looking at the laws of uprightness in his heart, to the point where he does beyond the letter of the law. Amru Chazal, okay, there he quotes that pasuk also. Like Chazal say when they say you should do the upright and the good. So in order to walk on the good path, you need two things. Number one, your path needs to be straight. And number two is you need to stay on the path. That he's just dissecting the path mashal. Kamosha Amar Hashem Necheni B'tzidkascha Hayashar Lefanai Darkecha. I don't know exactly how to punctuate that. Guide me with your righteousness that is upright on the path before you. I don't know what that is. Umisha Eno Yashar, Ein Darkly Yashara. Someone who is not upright, his path will not be upright or will not be straight. V'tzarech Ezer Mimarom Lahaishir Darcho, and he needs help from on high to straighten his path. Aval Gam Hayashar, Hagam Shadarcho Yashara Mitad Midas Hayosher Shabo. The Yashar, even though his path is straight because of the midah of uprightness in him, Adain Tzarech Shianchenu Haderech, he also needs the path to guide him, because his bodily needs and his matters, I don't know what that means, will prevent him sometimes from going on the path. Okay, this is so complicated. Okay, now he goes to Tom. Timimu, the definition of timimus is that you stay on one track perfectly without deviating. And you also don't have any turnings or other intentions. Utmimus hazeh, so that does sound like simplicity. Utmimus hazeh, kishitimsa belev yasharim, when you find this tmimus in the heart of yasharim, tanchem haderech, then the derech will guide them. Ki az lo yakvuhu hamoniim hamatridim, then they won't be impeded by the obstacles that distract them. The self Bogey mishadim, I don't know what he's saying. The corruption of the traitorous will despoil them. Habogdim him hevak yishrei lev. The bogdim are the opposite of those who are upright in heart. Shehim yelchu hevach hayosher. They walk on the opposite path of the yosher. The selef nikra masha makalka hayosher v'tzedek. Selef is what destroys uprightness and righteousness. V'zeh yishodosam. That will destroy them. Sheselef hazeh dome kilistim hamatzuyim baderech ikish v'yishimon. This corruption is comparable to armed bandits that are on the twisted paths. Shiyavus hon hanefesh via pila lever shachas, that they despoil him of his wealth and throw him into the pit. Okay, that was a lot there. I don't know if I have energy to work this out after that whole idea.
He wasn't saying that it was that the crookedness was applying to the Yasharim, was he? He was still keeping them separate.
I think so. Yeah. It sounds like there's good ideas there. I did not realize it was going to be that much. And I think working out the ideas that we did was enough for me. So we can talk about other stuff. I just don't want to try working out the Malbim now. It's possible, by the way, even though we've never done this before, it's possible. I want to go through the Rabbeinu Yonah, and it's possible that we will actually come back to this pasuk next week and do the Rabbeinu Yonah on it, because it's Rabbeinu Yonah, like I said, has like an essay on this, and I'll have to decide whether it's worthwhile for us to do, and then maybe do some other Mefarshim also, because I really liked the idea that we had tonight. But there's other good stuff. Whew, okay, that was a workout. Okay, anything else before we end for tonight? I think we're done with Mefarshim for now. We're yeah.
I mean, maybe just, I thought it was interesting when you're talking about like the methodology that you were learning from Reb Moskowitz and that Sean was tapping into. Maybe, like, I don't know if we could unpack that a little bit, but I found that interesting.
Yeah. So what it reminds me of is the derech of learning of Chumash that I've been attracted to over the last couple of years, especially. I came up with a name for it. The name for it is Radical Pshat. And Radical Pshat is done by it's allegedly done. They don't always stick to it. They don't always have the consistency, the Tmimus. But Rashbam, Ibn Ezra, and Mahari Kra are the three. And Rabag tries to do it, but less consistent, and some others. And Radical Pshat is stated by the Mahari Kra, who says that the psukim are complete and everything we need is in the psukim. So you don't need to go to Midrash. You don't need to go to other facts from outside of the Torah. Everything is there in the pshat. And what the methodology for Mishlei is that everything you need to understand the pasuk is in the pasuk itself. And so you don't need stuff from outside. And like in terms of what you posit, you really shouldn't posit entities that are not in the pasuk. So like in this case, it robs them, so it would be very easy to say that the Selef Bogdim robs them of money, but the pasuk doesn't talk about money, So Sean was looking for what can it rob them of? Well, the only thing that we've seen in the pasuk is guidance, and the guidance is the thing that would be a loss if they didn't have it. So it fits into the word robbing. So he was only looking within the pasuk to find what was the to answer that question.
So question on that actually, if in the first pasuk we established what to what is the Yashar being guided to, right? Wouldn't that also be a loss? Meaning, like, can you just slap that onto the second half of the pasuk?
What is
Meaning
the
that would be
guided
robbed.
to?
Meaning.
Oh
meaning like
yeah, right. Yeah, you could say that, right. So
Meaning
which is effectively what Sean was saying, right? Is that the Yashar is being guided to do good based on the values, and that's what is being lost by the Bogdim.
Right, meaning like the like guided to what or to where, like
Right,
that
yeah.
would be lost. Yeah.
Yeah, and theoretically those could have ended up in different directions. I think here it ended up the same way,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the thing. Here's my objection to Rabbi Moskowitz, which is that Rabbi Moskowitz is correct that it's always best to be conservative in your thinking and not posit entities that are unwarranted. Like that's Occam's razor, But in Mishlei, you see that the Mefarshim are always like, let's say, like, we've encountered this a little bit because we're in chapter 10, but in our morning Mishlei class, we've encountered this a lot that, we're doing chapter 21 and the Mefarshim will say, yeah, this was already explained earlier in the book, or like, this is relying on premises from earlier in the book, So you see that they don't always get everything just from the pasuk itself, or you see, for example, like we had the pasuk at the beginning of the parak where they were relying on Torah, where Shlomo was relying on Torah, So it's not like every pasuk you only have to get, like, close your ears to anything else other than the pasuk, So I agree with Rabbi Moskowitz in the tendency that you should try to be as conservative as possible, but I don't agree with him or with those Mefarshim I mentioned in the absoluteness of like, no, we're not allowing anything to the pasuk other than the pasuk itself. Like sometimes Shlomo is assuming that you are familiar with other things,
Right.
Or sometimes like just, he might refer to something that his audience didn't need for other stuff, but we do. For example, like there's a pasuk, I don't know why this is the first example that comes to mind, that he talks about a tzipor and a dror. Okay, now a dror is a type of bird, and it was a specific type of bird. And if you look at the Mefarshim, it describes the nesting habits of these birds. Now, apparently in Shlomo's time, it was well known, and he didn't have to explain it. Just like when we say, for example, like if you use a mushel of like the rooster, like a rooster crows at dawn, and then you went to Antarctica or like to the Arctic, and like the Eskimos aren't familiar with roosters, like they're gonna have to look it up and bring stuff in from outside of the pasuk because they're not familiar with it. But for us, it's known. So there could be a lot of stuff in the Torah or in Mishlei where if we tried to implement a derech where we didn't look outside of the pasuk, we would be missing stuff that Shlomo himself would want us to get, and just we happen to be lacking that information.
Yeah, so I think the question really is, at what point are you saying you're looking outside of the pasuk? Because
Exactly.
when Shlomo Melech wrote, those birds or whatever, in reality, like that's you're still explaining, the birds. It's just you need to research the facts on what those birds were.
Right.
But that's still being conservative. That's not
okay. Right. So here's the thing, though. Okay. So let me give you an example where it's not conservative. Is the entire parish of the Malbim. Okay. And so this is why I like the Malbim's ideas, but I don't like him as a starter commentary, because again, he holds that there's no such things as synonyms in Hebrew, and that every nuance matters. And he formed his theories by going through, let's say, every single instance in Tanakh with the word Yashar and coming up with a unified theory. And he'll say that, like, you can't get the pasuk's idea without like getting that nuance, So it's a very, what Rav Pesach often would call a top-down theory, that you're walking in with a preconceived notion. Now, he built up his theory, I'm sure, from the ground up, but for us to use it, like he's walking in with all these definitions already, and that's what we want to avoid, and that's not just like, that's not being conservative, that's being
that's being extreme.
Exactly. So going back to the way you phrased the question, Ariel, is like, how do you know when you're doing one and not the other? Like let's say, for example, you have these cases in Torah where you have people like again Joshua Berman, right? So Rabbi Dr. Joshua Berman. So he is a big fan of showing how we look at the Torah from our modern perspective, but if you were familiar with ancient Egyptian, like language or conventions or symbolism, you would realize that the Torah is like relying on familiarity with that in order to make certain points, So like he would argue that that's like the bird thing, where it's just facts that were available to everyone back then, and like we just lost them, so we have to like artificially reconstruct them. But like at a certain point, that becomes a derech, a methodology of approaching the text, where you're looking for like ancient polemics that the Torah is engaging in, or like ancient symbolism, and then it becomes its own derech, so like the line is a little difficult to draw sometimes.
Right. And just another point, like the Mishnah that we're doing in the morning, like in Parashat Beis, I think it is reasonable to take what we learned from the beginning of Mishleic, because at a certain point, like if you read 12 chapters, I mean, Shlomo is gonna assume that something.
Exactly. Right.
So like it's not so crazy to be less conservative, because he's assuming basic stuff at this point.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So
and
maybe the methodology is like, in the beginning you should be less more conservative, but towards the end of Mishlei, it's okay to take risks.
Right. And this is Rabbi Zimmer's question on me, which is why don't I do the first 9 chapters, Good
question.
Maybe we'll have to do that at some point, It's not that I don't do it. It's just, I focus on the rest of Mishlei, because I think that's primary, but I trust the Mefarshim to take us back to wherever we need to know from the first parts. Okay. Speaking of integrity, I need to stick to my bedtime schedule. So, so I think let's stop for tonight. But that was a good pasuk and a good idea, good teamwork also.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you. I'll see you.
Thank you.